episode of Mics On, we have Shakir Husain. Shakir Husain is a longtime entrepreneur based out of Karachi, but currently he is in Walnut Creek in the US. Shakir, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Asad. Thanks for having me on. Lovely to be here. So,
Yeah.
as you said, I've been, an entrepreneur for about 21 years now. And my life before that, for a couple of years, I worked in private equity in Abu Dhabi. And I started Creative Chaos in 2000. And I've sort of lost track of the businesses I have been involved with since then and started, and a lot of them failed, a lot of them didn't, and I'm also a partner in a company called Rally Cry Ventures, which is a early stage investment fund, and what's it called? We primarily invest in early stage startups based out of the US and some in Pakistan as well. And that came about as a result of my partner and I investing in startups in a very amateurish sort of way, cutting personal checks about 15 years ago. So, yeah, been in the space for a while. And again, lovely to be here and be chatting with you.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you again for taking out the time for this. So, based on your past experiences, especially also with investing in these different startups, you have, and the idea of Mike's On is again to touch on different generations throughout, different generation gaps in the workforce right now, impact as a buzzword, culture in the workspace as well, and then of course stories and how they're being told as well. And I'll dive straight into the M of Mike's On millennials. And tell me a little bit about what is your perception of the different generations that do exist in the workspace as well. We briefly spoke about this off camera as well, where you mentioned that it's not necessarily about which generation you're working with. It also varies across the world too. So I want to know about your thoughts on the debate between millennials versus Gen Z, and that too in like different parts of the world.
Look, I think that every generation looks at the younger generation and says, okay, they talk about how it was different in their time, and the younger ones, they do things in a different way, and usually it's sort of negative. And I just don't sort of buy into that. And I mean, these are again stereotypes that we sort of put in place to make sense of things. And again, like all stereotypes, there are some truths in there, but I think just taking a broad brush and painting it across it doesn't work. I think even if you look at culturally, if you look at a millennial in the US on the East Coast, they'll be different from someone on the West Coast versus Pakistan versus I don't know, Hong Kong. So I think geography impacts, but more than geography, I think socioeconomic realities also kick in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you take a kid who's not as like more privileged young people behave and act differently than less privileged ones. So I think privilege has a lot to do with it. And I think one of the rules that we use at Creative Chaos when we're hiring is that we try and not hire people who don't need the paycheck. And I think that there's a differentiator. There's a lot of trust fund kids out there, and I'm not saying they're not smart, but I think that how they act and the decisions they make would be very different from somebody who actually needs to earn that money to be able to contribute to their household,
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody who's treating it like pocket money and working because everyone's doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but
it
that's
does.
sort
It
of
does. But do you feel that that's something that you've noticed with Creative Chaos is a local setup, right, in Pakistan? Am I correct? Or
yeah.
do
But
you
there's
have?
also there's Creative Chaos North America, and then
Okay.
there's Creative Chaos in Pakistan as well.
And does the same rule apply in the States as well? Like, have you
Oh,
observed that same
absolutely.
behavior as well?
I think to a lesser degree, I think work ethic uh, is different in the US versus Pakistan, and I don't think that has anything to do with Generation Z or millennials or boomers or whatever. But I think just the culture of working, starts very young. So I think that, when it was the boomers, I guess, they were doing their paper routes, and summer jobs were and are a real thing. So, I mean, I'll give you and I like speaking with sort of personal examples, because,
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't experienced it, I feel that you aren't really qualified to talk about it. But like, I have two boys, 10 and 14. Um, One of them has just today started going into the riding school that he used to go to. He wanted to ride, and he's going to be helping out there with cleaning the stalls, taking care of the horses, giving lessons, and in lieu of that, he's going to get
Mm-hmm.
his riding time. So I'm not going to have to pay for it. So while
Mm-hmm.
he's not eligible to get a job at 10,
Mm-hmm.
he can earn that.
Yeah.
My older son last summer worked at the same place, and his job was to actually shovel muck and
Yeah.
horse shit,
Yeah.
and I think it's really good experience. I think that at least in the middle class or upper middle class in Pakistan, it's frowned upon कि जी बच्चे को काम पे लगा दिया, and so as a result, you don't get that experience from a younger age. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly normal for high school kids to have a job to earn their own money. Whereas if you look at the equivalent middle class family in Pakistan, the kid is more likely to just go to the parents, get some money, and then do whatever. And as you go up that income ladder, that money and is way more. So it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've interviewed candidates at Creative Chaos who have been like fresh out of school, but driving like a BMW,
Mm-hmm.
wearing a Rolex to that
Yeah.
interview, right? So, I mean, it's an interesting one, but I definitely think work culture is different just because of. But again, you go lower down the income scale, there's young kids in Pakistan who go and get jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
not because their parents are trying to teach them the value of money and of earning, but more because they have to earn and they have to contribute to their household.
Mm-hmm. Right. True. So, because you mentioned the income brackets as well, and this is personally that I've noticed in conversations with SECA or SECB, is that the definition of impact also is, or the use of the word impact is very normal in their language, and there'll be individuals from Gen Z that will choose to enter into the corporate space and climb that ladder to make that impact. Um, but so I want to know a little bit about your perception on this or your take on this as well as that. Do you feel that now the idea of trying to change the world is something which is coming up more and more in those fresh out of school kids that do come from a higher income bracket, or do you feel that that's actually something which you've seen across the board? If you
I
or
think
if you have.
across the board. I think when I look at Gen Z is interesting to me, right? They are the true digital natives. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
since the time they were born, they have been exposed to information, devices, technology in a way that older generations have not
Mm-hmm.
experienced. Like, I look at my younger son, and I still remember. I think he was like 2 or 3, and he was like trying to swipe the TV because for him a screen was interactive, and he was like, this
Yeah.
this is broken, and I was like, no, no, this doesn't work like that, right? So I think that lot is interesting in that sense, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, for me to see young people be optimistic and think big and want to change the world, I think is great. I mean, before they get jaded and cynical, I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's the perfect time and age to go in and want to create impact. I think that's wonderful, and we love. I personally and we as a company love to support young people who want to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Awesome. Interesting. Now, um, It'd be interesting to hear because you mentioned culture already a couple of times as well. What have you noticed as so? Firstly, do you think that workplace culture is something which can be dictated or which can be influenced by universities right before an
Sure,
individual?
I think so. I think universities in Pakistan, and again, this is based on my personal experience of interviewing, hiring candidates.
Mm-hmm,
I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think a couple of top tier universities are at least making an effort. But I
mm-hmm,
think that if you look at secondary, tertiary, universities, and which make up the bulk really, I think that there's a long way to go when it comes to preparing students for the real world, right? So,
mm-hmm,
uh, whether it's sort of how you put a CV together, how you sort of interview, how you present, just soft skills. I think that there's a lot of work that can be done in preparing kids for the real world.
mm-hmm. And and do you feel that again that is something which varies from location to location, from geography to geography? You've worked with startups in Pakistan and in the States as well. And oftentimes, correct me if I'm wrong, some of these startup founders might be more on the younger side in their mid 20s or early 30s as
Yep,
well. Yeah. So
early
do you feel
20s even.
yeah.
I mean,
Do you feel that the culture that they're trying to establish in their own organizations has come as a result of their location or as a result of their university experiences or like internship experiences in some way?
I think that kids, I speak about say California, right? I mean, I think they have a lot more because of proximity, right? So they have access to a lot of really interesting programs. So whether it's being run by people like Y Combinator or Techstars, or even the universities tying up with incubate local incubators, for instance, right? So the access they have to these programs is far more than say kids out of Karachi or Lahore or Faisalabad or Multan or Peshawar. So as a result of that, I think that they do have that edge. But I think the internet is a great leveler in one way too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're genuinely interested in learning new skills, you can be sitting anywhere and pretty much learn those same skills. I think a lot has to do with your own how motivated you are and
Mm-hmm.
how willing you are to learn about new things and new ideas and explore them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. So like, and that's something I can understand with is because at Backspace, Nagin and I ended up trying to make the culture over here such that we kind of wanted to challenge what's going out there, how the way of work is happening in the rest of the industry or in other spaces that we've come from, and trying to make sure that Backspace doesn't have that kind of toxicity as well that does come in the workspace
Sure,
as well. That love for
sure.
learning does come out right in the workspace as well. And
So
and
just
that,
to add to that, sorry, I'm
Mhm.
just interjecting, but like when you look at universities, it's all comes down to the quality of your professors. Okay, I
Mhm.
think that the least important, I mean, yes, facilities and space and buildings and campuses are important, but I think in my opinion they're the least important, because
Mhm.
what you do need is quality professors. So garbage in, garbage out. So
Right.
you can have the most wonderful campus in the world, but if you have you've got substandard professors or teachers who are not qualified to teach anywhere else in the world but Pakistan, then what are you going to get,
Mhm.
right? Nothing great. And then we also need to backtrack into sort of when we talk about culture, backtrack into our schooling system. So our schooling system is largely based on rote
Mhm.
and filling up as much paper as you can. So it's quantitative versus qualitative. And as a result, and of course, questions are discouraged throughout our secondary education. Okay, teacher ne jo kaha hai, wahi sahi hai. You go to university, how dare you challenge what the professor says? and then that goes on, right? Where you now are in a job and you're basically told that your superior or your manager has everything. As I like to say in meetings, is that, listen, I'm not the smartest person in the room. That's why all of you guys are here, because you're way smarter than me. Ask the questions, ask good questions, get to the bottom of whatever problem it is. And you'll only do that through asking questions and collaborating, right?
Right. True. And that's exactly why that if that tone gets set, which is why I always believe that culture is a top-down phenomena. Now, what do you have any recommendations or do you have any suggestions for how workplace culture, especially in Pakistan, could be improved across the board? Like, is there a golden rule in your eyes, or like one little nugget which every company, startup, firm could take up and implement?
Yeah, look, I think culture is driven by the founders, right, and the senior leadership. So you have to, like you said, it's top down. So you need to set those examples. If asking, encourage people to ask questions, especially the younger ones. So I mean, we have a, 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 a training a program, basically an orientation, and in that we try and hammer home that, dude, ask questions. We're human beings. You are going to make mistakes, but my thing is that just don't make the same mistake twice, right? Or thrice. I mean, let's try and make new mistakes. And I think it's okay to fail at whatever you're doing or not get it right the first time, but then learn from that. Use that as sort of a learning opportunity. I think, yeah, and really, like, everyone, especially managers, should check their ego in at the door and encourage younger people it should be an inclusive process. And especially in the line of work that I'm in, I don't think that just because you have 20 years or 30 years of experience in some place, you're going to come up with a better solution than someone who's been there for 3 years. Yes, you may have had more experiences, and those experiences may distill themselves into sort of knowing what's next, but then there's no guarantee there. So I think that really it becomes about inclusivity, and it's about also good leadership is also about making yourself redundant in a way, right? I mean, I always say a good manager's job is to make themselves redundant in a way, and that doesn't mean you're going to lose your job. It just means that now you're going to play more of a quarterback role or more of a advisory role than be sitting there and micromanaging, okay, this and do that. That stuff, I think, especially for the younger lot, I don't think it works. And I've never thought that was effective at all. I mean, you know, even 25 years ago.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. So, as a final question on culture itself, Pakistani work culture, three things you like about it and three things you hate about it.
Oof. I've look, I truly believe that we are second to none. I mean, when uh, you look at what our young people are. I mean, I always say that our young people succeed despite the state and not because of it. So you look at the limited opportunities, you look at the limited resources, and despite that, I think that when we go toe to toe with anybody, when our best goes toe to toe with anybody, we're as good as anyone else out there. So I mean, I think that and I really enjoy working with younger people. I think they've got great ideas. They're looking at like 70-year-old problems that the babas have not been able to solve. And I think that I see a lot of reason to be very, very hopeful. And when I look at these young kids, and um, on the things that I don't like, I think that there is a sense of entitlement that younger people have, and I think that they don't want to pay their dues, and they think there's a shortcut to getting to where they want, and unfortunately there isn't. And I don't know if it's a Pakistani thing or it's a general thing. I think young people are impatient, and that's fine. But I just think that everybody's got to pay their dues, and you've got to. I think the first couple of years should be focused more on learning sort of what the real world is about, and yeah. But I mean, I think that the tardiness in terms of time, that we laugh about it and say they see brown people time or real time. I think just putting a value to time. I think we need to learn to do that better. That don't waste other people's time. Respect your own time, respect other people's time. I think
Hmm.
that is something that we can definitely work harder and be better at. And I think
Yeah.
professionalism generally, and tying it into what we were talking about earlier about experiences and exposure and having the opportunities, whether it's in high school or in college, versus the first time you get a job is when you get your first job at 22 or whatever it is, when you graduate undergrad. I think that puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage because we're not familiar with sort of this what work culture is. And professionalism, again, it's not something that we're being taught that, okay, be on time at a meeting. This is how you uh, put together an effective sort of email. Like, don't go on and on and on. Like,
Hmm.
maybe not, don't use emojis in your in your work email. I mean, I don't know. I think that,
And don't start off with
again,
acha yaar.
yeah, abe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or those highs with lots of eyes in them and lots of
Yeah.
exclamation marks. So again, like, I think I wouldn't. I mean, I think that the time piece is something that if I were to zero in on like something, and when I say time, I also mean commitments. So if you say you're going to deliver something at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, then make sure you do it. And if you feel you can't do that, and by Sunday that you can't, then you should drop a note and say, may I please, get 6 hours more, or may I get another day on it. I mean, just basic Tamiz, basic courtesy, I think goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think that is something again which isn't just a university phenomenon. That has to go further back. I feel at the end of the day, जो बच्चा है वो भी अपने माँ बाप से सीख रहा है. They
Sure,
also have this
absolutely.
visa as well, right? But I'm going to segue a little bit into the work setting, especially how it has been, how it's transformed as well. Um, Firstly, what's your whole take on working from home? Do you feel like that's something which is going to be here for a while, working remotely? Do you think that it is the
Yeah, look,
present?
we have been from day one very, very flexible, and I think that had more to do with where we started off, right? So Karachi in 2000, I don't know how, if you remember, but there was lots of strikes, lots of bombings, lots of hartals, all of it, right?
Hmm.
I mean, despite being a national security state, it's really amazing how little security that the state is actually able to provide. But so from day one, because we were working with sort of customers overseas, we were very, very geared towards doing just that. And as the years grew and as the business grew, we sort of remote working capabilities were really solid. And then, of course, then having distributed teams, having colleagues, customers outside of Pakistan and in different geographies, we were very comfortable. So we were using Zoom way before the pandemic, collaboration tools. So, everyone was able to really plug in to it. I mean, and even earlier, I think we've been always very focused on getting work done rather than who clocks in at 9 o'clock and who clocks out at 6 o'clock, and did someone go for 2 hours or not. So I mean, we both, my partner and I, we're not saints. Our fathers didn't give us money to start this company. We didn't raise VC money. It's all our own hard-earned money. um, so I mean, we've and we recognize that life also happens. Like, your entire life is not just your work or your job. So there's kids, there's parents, there's doctor's appointments. Some days you just don't feel like coming to work. So I think the focus has always been on delivering what you have committed to and as part of a team. And
Mm-hmm.
if some people have the aptitude where they can get it done in 2 hours, another person might take them 4 hours, another six. So really all people aren't created equal as well. So I think that
Yeah.
with that kind of focus on actually the work being delivered, we didn't care that much about where you're working from. And there've been times, so it's been super flexible. I think that when younger people come in, I think it's important to provide them that structure because they are transitioning from structure. So you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to just cut them loose. Um, but I think that once you've been around for a bit and you've sort of demonstrated that you are responsible and you are conscientious about what you're doing and you hold to your commitments, like really I mean during the pandemic we have colleagues, someone went off to Turkey, someone went off to Dubai to their sister's place, someone went up north, uh, again like uh, couldn't care less. Couldn't care less where someone's sitting and working.
And do you feel that that's something which I'm not going to say that companies need to adapt to, but do you feel that for Creative Chaos itself and for your other ventures as well, that's something that you could actually see a hardcore remote first approach for the long haul? Like being enabled in
Absolutely.
one in that
A-
regard is one thing, but having that as a first line of like operation.
Look, even before the pandemic, so we were hiring talent outside of Pakistan and in different cities. So even though we're HQ'd out of Karachi in Pakistan, we've got folks who are in working out of Lahore. We've got folks who are working out of Peshawar. So really we couldn't care less where someone's sitting. One of us directors, he's in Toronto. My partner is based out of Boston. I'm based here in California. We've got a creative director who's out here. We've got a creative director who's out in Boston. We're looking to hire another one out of Toronto. So really, like, I think that what COVID did was really, I mean, not for us, but for a lot of companies, just demonstrated what we already knew, I think, which was that, listen, you don't need people to be sitting in an office. Of course, it's nice. Listen, I miss seeing my colleagues and, being able to chat in person. But really, like, if you look at life, I save about an hour and a half easy on a
Mm-hmm.
commute in a train. I'm able to spend more time with my kids. My dogs are around here, and yes, I mean absolutely. Like last Friday, I went into the city. I had some meetings, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. But do we need to be every single day, with sitting in traffic going to work? Absolutely not.
Fair,
I mean, yes, I
fair.
think it's important to have space where teams can come and meet. I think it's super important for a number of reasons why teams should, a couple of times a week spend, 4 or 5 hours in the same space and eat together and, break the proverbial bread. But I don't think that to get the best out of people, you need to have them sitting in an office space.
Fair, 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 fair. All right. So, Shakir, tell me a little bit about your take on this is so this question was actually geared towards um, the anti-social media phase, right? That's going on. Stories are coming out in all formats now, right? Snapchat at its peak was all about being able to tell 10-second stories and having a new form of creative altogether. Instagram followed suit as well. Now you've got TikTok. And stories have transitioned over the years in so many different formats, from novels to short books to now 5 seconds
No,
and ten
man, go
seconds
back to
content.
the caves. The cave. I mean, the
Yeah.
drawings on the caves. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
was the first
Yeah.
form of storytelling started there.
Yeah, and now with all these different formats, also people are creating. Many creatives out there are coming out with some great work in that duration. What do you feel though is actually missing in the storytelling space altogether, or what do you feel is that story? What stories do you feel need to be told right now, especially with the times we're living in?
Man, uh, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
Um, I, I mean, I think that the stories that need to be told are the. I mean, I think that we need to backtrack a little bit, right? So I think that uh, when we talk about social media, I think that what we really need to understand is that the storyteller and the listener viewer of the story is the product. I mean,
Hmm.
and it's being done for free, but nothing in life is for free. So these are businesses, and their job is to make money off that content and get you to spend as much time as possible. Hence the algorithm and hence the rabbit holes that we find ourselves in. I mean, the times I'm guilty of it. I mean, it's like a guilty pleasure. I'd be like, oh, an hour went by and I'm just drilling down YouTube, got to get back to it. But I think that what we need to recognize is that, just like there are more journalists working for PR companies than for actual newsrooms. Okay. So a lot of this stuff, whether it's influencers so which stories are getting told? You know,
Hmm.
it's like when you go to a client and the client says, in Pakistan, कि जी बस viral करने, वीडियो बनाने के viral हो जाए बस, मजा आना चाहिए, and you're just like, like, and these large companies and PR companies are able to throw, you know, money up the wazoo to get not only tell the stories, but get the stories told. But which stories the stories that get told but don't get viral, or the stories just don't get told, I think those are the stories worth telling. You have all these people who are on the street,
Hmm.
homeless. Those stories aren't getting told, right? I mean,
Hmm.
or if they're being told, they're
There's
not
no
getting.
virality behind it. Yeah.
Exact, because there's nothing cool and sexy about like poor people in Pakistan. I mean, in that context.
Hmm.
So, everyone wants to, see the models and the musicians and the so-called celebrities prancing around. Uh, but for me personally, I mean, those are the stories that I think that should get told.
Right. Right. And
And
and you,
I mean, when you talk about what's not happening, I think there's an enormous amount. I mean, I think some of the TikToks that are coming in from rural Pakistan, I think they're fantastic, because that is sort of people are for the first time are being able to tell their stories. And I think that is one thing that the state is petrified of. So when you see things like the ban on TikTok earlier, it's because, these guys aren't on Twitter and Facebook. Like their jam is
TikTok.
TikTok, right?
Yeah. And that's actually, uh, I feel like that's also helped level the playing field now. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I call the internet the great leveler. I mean, look back in 2000, 2001. A kid from who worked for us, he went to Karachi University, didn't come from a connected background. He co-authored a book on .NET, and .NET was just starting out back then. But he co-authored a book on .NET, and I think that's fantastic. And that was only possible because of the internet. He
Hmm.
learned how to write better. He learned how to off YouTube and off the internet. He learned how to put it together, how to approach the publisher, and it was fantastic. Would not have been possible pre-internet.
Hmm. Right. Very true. Very true. And so, coming to the next question, do you feel that in our country in Pakistan, do you feel that there's this lack of guidance coming, not necessarily in a formal setting, but like how you mentioned, people will go on YouTube to learn something, but then there's also that aspect of mentorship. Do you feel that there's this lack of understanding of mentorship, or even a dearth of mentors over here?
Um, I think I don't know what that's like. I mean, I can tell you that both my partner and we have been I mean, we've mentored, I wouldn't say mentor, but I'd say anytime someone's reached out to us, we've tried to be as helpful as we can, giving our own limitations with time or connecting people. So Um, I think it sort of goes back to that joke, right? That about Jahannam mein, there's these big pots and they're ranked by nationality, and they all have guards around them so that the folks can't escape. And there's a tour being given of the facility, and there's one with no guards, and one of the people on the tour say, well, there's no guards up there, how come? He said, oh, that's the Pakistani cauldron, so anyone tries to climb out, someone pulls them back in. So I don't know if it has to do with that, but I personally know of folks, peers, friends, colleagues who do take out time to reach out to younger people. My request to younger people would be to have more clarity when they're coming, so that,
Hmm.
again, coming back to respecting time, your own and other people, so that when you do connect with somebody who can add value to what you're trying to do, then in that allotted time you're able to extract the most out of them. So it might be helpful that you send an email before, saying what you're looking for. Maybe they can help you refine that thought by email before you actually meet or talk. But I personally know of people who do mentor. But you're right. I mean, as a there should be more younger people being connected with. And by the way, these sessions aren't one way alone. I
Hmm.
mean, there isn't a day where I don't learn something new from someone way, way younger than me and with less experience. And
Hmm.
that's just how it goes. That's how learning. I mean, I think it never stops, and it's a journey. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I do agree with you that I think that more people. But again, it's like going to a doctor. Like if you go to a bad doctor, uh, you know,
Well,
that's
let's not go
probably
there.
uh, you know I mean,
Yeah.
there's one guy on he's basically a escaped felon from New York. He has cases pending there. He'd get arrested if he goes, but he's advising the government, and he's like, people think that this guy's like some kind of investing genius, right? But
Hmm.
again, spend money on PR, versus what the actual reality is. And would I ever send someone to this guy to get advice? Hell no. you know
Yeah, fair, fair. And at the end of the day, I think it's also about like I can speak on behalf of my generation. Is that there should be this understanding of or this desire to seek mentorship in the first place as well. It's not necessarily about you even finding the mentor. First, you should have the desire to want to get mentored as well.
Absolutely. So there's also that ego and that arrogance, right? That I mean, that's there, and where, KG, we know best. And I just say, okay, listen, I've made a lot of very expensive mistakes in my working career. Okay, bad
Yeah.
investments, bad decisions, and I was 24 when I started the company, so I didn't know a hell of a lot. So lots of those were made. So if I can actually distill that and give it to someone else, they can actually save a whole bunch of money and not
Yeah.
make those mistakes and make new ones. So, I
Yeah.
mean, thinking, I think that you know it all and you're like, the next whoever,
Yeah.
that's on you then. So, but I think that that's the first step, like wanting to
Yeah.
be able to, it's like there's a whole thing about business coaching that's out there today. And again,
Hmm.
my question is that, listen, have you started a business? Have you run a successful business? Have you sold a successful business? And if the answer to those things are no, I mean, I now want to really know how you're qualified to be a business coach.
Yeah. It's
You
not
know?
about the rah rah. Yeah, no, but I get it, and just because you say it like that as well, I have one simple rule. It's not about figuring out what is the right way of doing things from someone else, but it's figuring out also what not to be doing as well. I think that's the
Absolutely.
bigger take home for me. But as a final question to you, Shakir, is in your opinion, is obsessing integral to success?
Yeah, I think it depends on the business. I think it depends on the individual. I think you need all kinds of players. I mean, I think what makes success has a lot of ingredients that go into it, and there's lots of pieces. It's like a puzzle almost, right? And finding the right pieces to put together. So it's like, any other team. So whether it's a sports team or a business team, or I think finding people or players who complement each other. Like, I'm not a very detail oriented person. It's not what I'm good at, naturally
Yeah.
good at. My partner, I mean, he is phenomenal. I mean, he can just drill down. So it's a complementary team. So I don't want more of me. I want people around me or on my team that do the things that I don't do well. And I think that, but sure, I mean, listen, if you're a product person and the business is about a product and you're obsessive about your product, you're going to have a great product versus someone who says कि जी एक बस app बनाएंगे और वो viral हो जाएगी, like
Yeah.
so I think that that can be a good quality, but I think that if you have too many people obsessing about something, you'll never get anything done. So that balance, I think, is super important.
Fair. Interesting. Fair point. Fair point. Shakir, thank you so much for taking out the time for this. This was great. Um, for everyone who's watching this, there's more coming as well. Stay tuned for the rest of Mike's On too. Shakir, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Asad.